Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. A very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. And today it's just Karl and I, because we want to reflect on the fabulous journey that we've enjoyed with ATA. We've spoken to so many people on the podcast and indeed outside of the podcast, and we thought it'd be helpful to capture some of the themes that have come through repeatedly in those conversations and to talk to you about how we're listening to the feedback and shaping what we're building here at Athlete Transition Accelerator to ensure that we reduce the fear, the uncertainty and the anxiety that so many of you have expressed when you consider life beyond sport, and replace it with that sense of confidence, excitement, and energy to step into that next chapter. So as we dive into the topics and the themes, Karl and I will pull some of them out, and then we'll tie it back into a discussion about how we believe we can help you align with those themes. Because as we've said in multiple episodes, we're big believers that you've got to learn from those who have walked the path ahead of you. Why go down the blind alleys, the proverbial rabbit holes, trying to find the way forward when you can access wisdom and insight from the people that have already walked the path? So when the advice is there, we want to try and take that advice and then show you how we can support you and utilize that advice so that you're in the best possible position to accelerate into the next chapter of your career. So, Karl, if I throw it back to you, what's the theme that's resonated most keenly with you in all the conversations we've been having?
Well, we've had so many incredible conversations, but I suppose the one that is most pertinent and the one that's come up most often is it's never too early to start preparing for life after the game, or life beyond the game, sorry. The earlier, actually, the better. That's the key theme that keeps coming back to us, and this sort of comes in many different terms. But if you look at some of the guests that we've spoken to who have had challenging transitions, it stems with terrible circumstances in which they had to leave the game, and it was outside of their control. So if you look at Ollie Soames, for example, former first-class cricketer, sadly he had to retire during COVID. The financial state of cricket at that point just meant he couldn't get his new contract renewed. Then if we look at Jenny Casson, an Olympian, former Canadian rower, she was very keen to keep going. She wanted to continue on for the next Olympics in LA 2028, but unfortunately, the Olympics made the decision to remove her event. She did have options to change weight class and different competitions, etc., but her favourite was the event that they actually took away. And then, again, circumstances completely outside of your control. We have Connor Gilsonen, who we spoke to a couple of weeks ago, who unfortunately sustained that nasty concussion injury that meant he had to retire at an incredibly young age of 26. So all these guys, Connor had a good story. He had put things in place and he had a nice transition. But Jenny and Ollie, unfortunately, it was a bit of a challenging time because they hadn't started early in their career.
Yeah, and I think it's something we've said repeatedly, but it's easy for it to go in one ear and out the other. And there's no judgment to that. The young athlete, we've all been there. You feel invincible. You feel like your career is going to last forever, and that transition's something to think about in your mid to late 30s, perhaps. So I think it's been very powerful, as you say, the examples you give. And Will Fraser was another example, wasn't he, who had been there, done that, won the European Cup and the league with Saracens, but because of injury, had to retire again in his 20s. So we're not being alarmist, but we're just making people aware of investing in your future is not about accelerating you to the end of your sporting career. Far from it. We want everybody to have the longest possible career they can. But by making the time and the commitment to invest and understand what you want to do in the future, it removes a lot of that pressure. So in the worst case scenario, which, as I keep saying, we hope never happens, of injury or circumstances as Jenny experienced, you've got something on the shelf. You've got something that you can say, okay, this has come earlier than I thought, but let me bring down my transition plan. So it's about being ready. And the benefit of that as well is it will enhance your athletic performance, because we all know anxiety and fear will compromise our ability to perform. And if you've got that niggling thought in the back of your mind, what am I going to do? How am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to meet my financial commitments? That will eventually erode your ability to perform at the top of your game. Whereas if you're like, okay, and we've had plenty of guests give us these analogies, I knew what I was going to do. I'd invested in understanding what I wanted to do. I felt comfortable that I was ready to step into that. Then you finish your career with a far better psychology and a far higher likelihood of performing well.
Just to expand on that as well, James, and I think Conrad Smith mentioned this a few weeks back, is there's sort of overwhelming evidence to support this now as well. Those athletes that have external hobbies, have external interests, have started planning for the future because they allow themselves that opportunity to completely remove themselves from their sport. It's not all encompassing. It's not 24/7. Gareth Steenson pointed to this as well. When he had those external things going on that allowed that complete switch off from sport, when they went back into that world, they were more engaged, they were happier, they enjoyed the time there more, they were a better player, they were a better teammate. So this whole notion of you need to be completely involved in your sport to be successful, yes, to an extent that's true, but also now it's becoming quite overwhelming, the evidence to say that's not the be-all and end-all. It doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. Actually, on the contrary, if you want to be a better player, remove yourself. Give yourself time to completely switch off.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy. And someone like Conrad Smith, who's been there, done it, won 2 World Cups, I think everybody naturally stops and listens when he says, oh, and I love the way he framed it. When he came into the All Black squad, he was looking up to those established All Blacks. What are they doing differently? And they all had an ability to detach and step away. And I think just building on that point, Karl, we're not talking about being negligent in your professionalism. It's just small windows. It might only be half a day during the week where you step away instead of just being back on the video, analysing more footage, or back in the gym, or back into working on your technique. Those small windows can make all the difference. And I think, it's a great point to make. So hopefully on that theme, people listening say, well, everybody's talking about it. Invest in your future. It can help my performance here and now. It'll help the transition and remove some of that anxiety. And it'll allow me to start identifying what I like and what I don't like. And that probably takes me into one of the themes that really has resonated with me in the conversations about being able to look at what you do like and what you don't like, almost finding things that fit and don't fit. And again, whilst you've got the name in my mind, Conrad Smith made this reference that so many people think all they can do is coach. And coaching is a wonderful pursuit for a lot of people. And we're not in any way disrespecting that career path. But a lot of people trap themselves into thinking, well, I'm a rugby player, so I've got to be a rugby coach. Or I'm a cricketer, I've got to be a cricket coach. That's not the only option available to you. There's lots of transferable skills. And one of the themes we've heard repeatedly is take the time, be curious, and start to explore what you like or don't like. Rule things in and out. And Conrad alluded to when he stopped playing in France, he dipped his toe into that coaching environment, but decided it wasn't for him. It's not what he wanted to do. So being able to explore things, have conversations, meet people for coffees, go and do a bit of a placement. People talk about popping into sponsors and talking with them and understanding their business. It allows you to really start to shape an understanding of, oh, this is really intriguing me. I want to learn more. Or actually, this is repelling me. This is not what I thought was relevant. So I think that's another core theme that I'm sure you'll agree we've heard come through a lot in the discussions.
Yeah, 100%. It's come through pretty much most weeks for most people. And it was different for each person. Some people really dove into this and it really helped their transition. Others, it's been more of a reflective practice of the opportunities they had, the network that they had at their disposal to just jump in and be curious. And unfortunately, they didn't do it in their time. And now, as they transitioned out, they found it a little bit more tricky because that network and those opportunities hadn't been created.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a key theme that kept coming up.
And I think that takes us into the concept of your network. So how are you going to identify what appeals and what doesn't appeal? Well, the logical first step is to look around you, see who's around you, and who can you approach to have a conversation with. And this theme came up a lot. Joe Jacobson mentioned it. Conrad mentioned it. Lots of our guests have mentioned the fact that when you are on corporate duties or match day duties in team sport environments, it's easy to think, oh, I've not been selected, or I'm injured, or I've got this duty to do. It's not a chore. It's an opportunity. You are surrounded by businessmen and women who are emotionally invested in you as an individual and your club, And it's a perfect opportunity to explore your curiosity and to ask questions and to learn about them, their journey, and their business. And I think one of the other core messages in this is that you have a window of opportunity. When you are still an elite athlete, these people will welcome conversations with you with open arms. That's not to say they'll repel you when you've retired, but your stock is just a little bit different. Your currency is just a little bit different from being an existing professional player at the club they support or within the discipline that they support. So I think that notion of starting to build your network is something that's really powerful. And those of you that have listened to the podcast will have heard me talk about Shaquille O'Neal. I think it was Shaquille O'Neal. My mind goes
Magic
blank.
Johnson.
It was Magic Johnson. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So Magic Johnson, we found an interview, didn't we, where he talked about his biggest breakthrough was when he went to the commercial team and asked for all the contact details of the people who owned the courtside seats. And he went and met with all of them, went for coffee, met them for lunch, and a whole raft of business opportunities transpired from those conversations. And his statement that was so powerful was, in essence, he made more money from those investments than he did from the salaries that he earned playing professional basketball. Now, that principle translates to every athlete that we're talking to. Go and speak to the commercial departments within your clubs if you're in a club, or speak to the relevant boss, CEO, MD of your organization or discipline, and just ask, who would you recommend? Who can I speak to? And I think my final point on this, Karl, is don't be frightened of a no. The worst that anyone can say is a no, but invariably, and I can almost guarantee this, if you approach anybody, whether it's within your discipline or outside, this is a transferable point for anybody listening, and simply approach someone and say, I really admire or respect what you have achieved in area X or area Y. I'd love to come and ask your advice and learn a little bit more about how you achieved it. There's not a human being in the world that's not going to be flattered by that, who will say, yep, love to have a conversation. So we build this potential barrier up and we don't make those approaches. So I think network development is front and center for every elite athlete to start thinking about how can you start that today, because it has that dotted line back to our previous point of identifying things that intrigue you and interest you, and equally pushing you away from things that on reflection you now realize you might have thought you wanted to do, but you no longer do want to do.
Yeah, perfect. And just to expand on that no as well, James, it's currently a no. Whether you ask the question or not, it's currently a no. Yeah. So if you do ask that question and they say no, like you said, it's typically not going to be a no flat, that's it, done. It's more likely going to be, I can't right now. I've just got too much going on. Contact me again in a week or so and we'll explore the direct at that point. But absolutely. 99% of people will say, yes, absolutely. Particularly when your stock is high and you're a current athlete, people want to talk to you. Mm-hmm. They want to know your story. And if you flip that narrative and you're curious in that individual, you're essentially playing to their ego. They're going to want to have a conversation. They're going to want to tell you how they've been successful, how they got into this certain sector, how have they built their business. And this gives you an incredible foundation to start building your level of knowledge, not just from a standpoint of identifying industries to say yes and no to, but also you can start building up levels of knowledge that you can translate into whatever area you choose to go to.
Yeah.
And just to pick up a little bit more on this, unless you're playing European football or one of the huge NFL, NHL, basketball, whatever it may be, sadly, with the way the finances of the world right now, there aren't enough eyeballs on sports to be significant enough for an organization to get benefit of sponsoring a sport. So typically, these individuals or businesses are sponsoring your club, your sport, because they're either a fan of your team or they're a big fan of the sport. They will talk to you. Mm. They're involved in your club for a reason. If you open that door and say, can I have a chat? They will see, they'll snap your hand off.
Yeah.
They will absolutely want to talk to you.
And they'll give you work experience. This is the other thing.
Yeah.
So the first thing is the curiosity, the conversation. Tell me about your journey. Let me understand a bit more about this sector. If it then works, a number of our guests, Conrad Smith works in law, but he used to pop into a law office. He talked about stepping away from training and going and spending half a day in the law office regularly. They will allow you to come in. They'll show you the ropes. Who knows? I don't want to guarantee anything, but if you go and spend time there, there's every chance that that may open the door to employment opportunities in the future as well, because they get to understand you, your capabilities, you understand the organization. All these opportunities start to expand. And for anybody listening, we see this in our coaching work all the time. The fear and the anxiety closes our rational thinking process down, and it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how to. Where do I even begin? Well, here's an easy step. Look around you. Look at the network that's around you. Start to approach people, and start to explore the opportunities that are in your ecosystem.
Another interesting theme, James, that keeps coming up from pretty much all of our guests is those skills that's made you an elite athlete. How have you gotten to the very top of your game, and what are they, basically, in a nutshell? And also, sort of, what are those transferable skills, and how can you use them in your next chapter? So, what are some of the things that's come to mind to you there when we've had those conversations and that point's come up?
Yeah, I think it's a great one, Carl, because I think so many of the athletes we're talking to have got a mental block on their transferable skills. This is where the pressure's building inside them, the anxiety. What do I do? I'm just a X. I'm just this athlete or that athlete. How will that translate into industry? And part of our work in our coaching space has very much been to sort of just take a breath, calm down. There's a whole raft of transferable skills when you actually take the time to recognize it. So using some examples that were actually on the podcast, Conrad Smith talked about this ability to give and take feedback, to constructively look at performance, the good and the bad elements, and to build a plan and a strategy to improve, and how athletes in pretty much every discipline are being given feedback and asked for feedback on an almost daily basis. And he made that link into then stepping into industry, and how surprised he was at how inefficient that feedback system was. Now, wearing my other hat as a leadership coach and the work I do away from ATA, I concur with that. I see that time and time again. So many people struggle to receive constructive feedback without letting their ego get in the way and becoming defensive. And so many people struggle to even try and give that feedback for fear of causing offense. So one of the biggest X factors I see elite athletes having is that they've been conditioned for so many years to be able to park their ego and to get used to giving and receiving feedback with the aim of driving their performance. Now, they can carry that over into pretty much any sector, role, or industry they want to step into, and it will give them a competitive advantage, because we can promise you it's not the norm. So immediately I want to sort of really anchor that one in with everybody listening to say, yeah, well, I do have to give and take feedback every day. I didn't realize, probably, as you hear us talking about this, you probably don't realize what a transferable skill that is. So that's probably the first one that comes to mind. How about you? What jumps into your mind, Carl?
Yeah, I think just to build upon the feedback as well, James, is actually making athletes aware of how different it is when you actually leave sport, and the frequency, well, firstly, the frequency in which you get feedback, but also the clarity you gain from what you receive, because it's a completely different world. And there's probably a whole podcast by itself that we could talk about around this, but just a nod to athletes to just think about how you give and receive feedback right now, and how you could look to use that in your next chapter, because it is very different. It's very different. But for me, just to build upon the feedback there, James, and I suppose to wrap that up, it's the strength of which an athlete has to communicate with clarity, with speed, with clear thought of mind, and ability to sort of put this across in a really, really calm, analytical way that everybody can understand. But also to wrap that into teamwork, how athletes have an incredible ability to work within a team, to fulfill their requirements within that team, but also to wrap all of that up and have everybody sort of get up to that level to make sure they're doing what they need to do as well. And communication and teamwork has actually come up quite a lot, not just in our podcast, but if you look outside of this, and again, outside of sport, there was quite a lot of research that recently came out of the US that was exploring why are businesses failing and what are the common themes that we're seeing. And it came down to two reasons. One was poor communication, and the other was poor teamwork. And in a nutshell, that's everything an athlete is. Whether you're playing in a team or actually when you're competing, you're performing your skills on an individual basis, you're still part of a team. You have a coach, you have your medics, you have your S&C guys, you have your nutritionists, you have your manager. You're still working within this team that you have to communicate clearly with. And these skills are so insanely transferable and so desired by hiring managers. It's got to a point now where it's actually quite funny, where these skills are desired. It's just people aren't mentioning it. It's not been pushed to athletes. Athletes aren't being made aware. And again, that's the point of these podcasts is those people have been there, done it, walked the path and had to find this out, unfortunately, after the fact. We can share that information, utilize the benefit of hindsight and just really start preparing athletes for what you can take into your next chapter. And again, just to build on that, we recently had a great conversation with Rodrigo, who's part of the IOC. And he spoke to us about a piece of research that he'd performed with Deloitte or Deloitte, however you pronounce it, where they have this annual goal where they introduce several athletes into their business on an annual basis. And they sort of went back over a decade or so to understand what actually happens to these departments when they introduce athletes. Does it have an impact? What's the effect? If so, just how impactful is this? And they found on average that performance across the board increased by approximately 150% when an elite athlete, an elite individual was placed into this department, because the effect it's contagious. Everybody else sees what these individuals are doing in response to it. But they've set a new bar now. Well, I can't stay down here because I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to have to, what are they doing? How are they doing it? Let's see. Let's come along. Let's come along for the journey.
And that's something we hear in the conversations all the time, don't we? Because we're talking on both sides of the coin here. We're talking with the athletes. We're also talking to the businesses and encouraging them to be receptive and open to bringing elite athletes into their business. So for anybody that's still competing or indeed is coming close to the transition, there's some transferable skills that I'm sure you've got. The ability to communicate well, the ability to align people alongside you with a vision, with a mission, with a direction of travel, the ability to give and take constructive feedback. It's not always positive, but to do that in a respectful and succinct manner, the ability to develop team and set standards. And that's no surprise, the Deloitte research, because you are used to setting standards. You hold yourself to a standard on a daily basis, because if you take shortcuts in training, shortcuts with your nutrition, shortcuts on your analysis or your technical development, then you suffer. So when you step into industry, bringing all these traits, being a good communicator, giving feedback, developing team and setting standards, it doesn't just set you into a position to perform really well. It puts you into a position to become a leader very early in that tenure, because leaders set the standards and leaders hold these traits. So we could, as you say, spend a whole podcast on this topic, Karl, but I think it's so important for people to remove some of this anxiety and fear and say, yes, you will need some technical development of certain skills depending on what sector you're going into, but you have an abundance of transferable skills already. It's about how you shape it and having confidence to present it in the right way. And I think that probably takes us into the final theme. We could take so many themes, but the final theme for me is how you craft your story. A lot of athletes have talked very candidly to us and to other sources around the world about this notion of an identity crisis. When you stop, you're no longer the professional netball player or cricketer or Olympic athlete or rugby player. It comes through time and again. You go from this structured environment to what am I now? And it's so important to help people reframe that and to look at their sporting chapter as exactly that, a chapter. It's not the whole story. And to get people to step back and say, there's every likelihood that you're going to spend a significantly more lengthier time period, in industry than you will in sport. There are the odd exceptions. We've spoken to a couple of people. Joe, 19 years in football. James is coming out shortly, 20 years in first-class cricket. But the vast majority of people, you probably 10 to 15 years. Well, you're going to work a lot longer than that. So there's every reason that your industry chapter will be longer and more successful and more fulfilling than your sport. It's hard to think like that when you're still in your sporting bubble. It'll never get better than this. But actually, there's every chance it can. And the reframing of your story and understanding the potential of the next chapter, I think is really important, Karl, to people falling into those identity crises and all the associated mental pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, I think the potential is a key word there in terms of what your second chapter can look like. And we always ask the question, it's intentional. It came from a good friend of ours, Sebastian de Chavez. Who says your sporting chapter has to be your best?
Exactly.
Like you mentioned, more often than not, for the majority of athletes, you're going to be out of your sport for longer than you're in it, in terms of competing on the TV and people getting to see you and scream your names. So if you're leaving that period of your life with the mindset of, well, this is it, it's never going to be any better than this, you're going to be miserable for a long time. And what's your purpose then? What is it you're trying to achieve in your second chapter? And well, that's something that we love to explore. We intentionally ask that question of the current athletes that we work with. Who says this chapter has to be your best?
Yeah.
And you see their response. It's almost like a light bulb goes off as, well, actually, yeah. Who says this has to be the best? Why can't I go into my next chapter full of excitement, knowing that the amount of opportunities out there is mind-blowing? Because as we talk about a lot on the podcast, sport and what the definition of success is black and white, and there's a ceiling. If you're a Premiership rugby player, you can win the Premiership and you can win the Heineken Cup. I'm old, the Heineken Cup.
Yeah,
it will always be the Heineken Cup. If you're a footballer and you happen to play for your country, you play for England, you could win the Euros, you could win the World Cup, but that's it. Yes, it's incredible, but that's the level. As soon as you leave that sporting world, there's no ceiling to what it is you can achieve. There's no ceiling to the opportunities that you can put in place, the goals that you want to put in place, what you want to set. There's no ceiling. You can be who you want, you can do whatever you want, and it's just incredible. So the whole notion around the anxiety about what comes next, the fear that comes along with that, it's understandable because you've been fully immersed in this world for so long. Often from a child, it's been your goal to get to this point, but you have to leave.
Yeah.
Sadly, you have to leave. And the best way to go about that is to realize and understand from those that have been there and done it that the second chapter can be so much better.
Yeah.
It can be so much more.
Absolutely. And what we're trying to do here is provide perspective. It's no way are we criticizing people's mindset. We're just looking at the themes. The overarching theme of existing athletes when we talk about the next chapter is one of freeze, fear, anxiety, stress. Where do I start? Let me just push that to the back of my mind. We're providing perspective. We're opening insight and wisdom from people who've walked that path and saying, actually, focus fully on your sporting chapter, but be excited about what comes next. So I think part of our DNA, Karl, has always been this isn't something that you start thinking about when an injury strikes or when that contract's not renewed. This is something that you think about today, wherever you are on your journey. You start thinking about, well, these are the key themes and the key bits of advice that are coming through from people like James and Karl or like the athletes that have walked the path. So how do I bring that to life? And we've been reflecting and evolving our offer continually, haven't we, to say, well, how do we best serve? Because we want to have a number of options to allow people to say, how do I work with Athlete Transition Accelerator to start making that investment? So I think there's probably 4 core areas that we should touch on. One is coaching and mentoring. A second area is your professional brand and helping you frame your story for a successful transition into industry. A third area is our Success Beyond Sport program, which allows you to dive deeply into specific industries and really enhance your knowledge, experience, and skill set if you have a clear line of sight that this is something you want to step into beyond sport. And our fourth area, which is just about to launch, is our membership site and how we're using that to provide people with a very low cost volume of information and insight and knowledge to help prepare that transition. So let's look at those in isolation and just give everyone a little bit of detail about each one in turn. So let's start with the coaching. We recognize that every athlete's different. Everybody's got different fears, different anxieties. Yes, there are themes, as we've talked about on this podcast, but the coaching and the mentoring support is about getting underneath the bonnet of exactly where you are, where you want to get to, what the potential real or perceived barriers are to arriving at that destination, and starting to shape a plan. So we spend a lot of time understanding you as an individual, helping you identify what's important to you, what your values are, how you define success, and supporting you with the benefit of our experiences, personally, and also the wisdom and the insight we derive from the hundreds of conversations we're having every month. There are so many patterns in life. And as we said earlier in the show, you can walk down a path and think you're the first one to walk it and walk into dead ends and roadblocks and all these stress points and frustrations, or you can take a moment and access insight and wisdom to avoid some of those pitfalls and to find the shortcuts to move more effectively down the road. So one of the blessings of what we now do is we spend so much time talking to people. We're constantly being exposed to great ideas, great strategies, and we never breach confidentialities, but we can obviously gather that individual insight and we can help bring it to you as part of our coaching and mentoring to say, we've seen people in similar situations, here are some of the things that have worked for them. So the coaching and mentoring is very bespoke, it's very personalized, and that's one core area of how we can help you prepare for life beyond the game.
Perfect. Yeah, the coaching, I mean, that's a key offering that we have here at Athlete Transition Accelerator. But to sort of add on to that, and it's almost complementary to the coaching, is the professional branding. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, truth be told, it hadn't something we really thought about. It wasn't part of the initial conversations we had. But as we were talking to these former athletes, and again, utilizing the benefit of hindsight, one of the things that kept coming up was they wish they'd understood how to utilize LinkedIn and really create a story around, yes, their sporting chapter, but what is it am I doing now to be ready for life after this, and developing that network. And just on top of that, with the former athletes, it's actually coming up now with current athletes, because everyone's really comfortable with Instagram story and Facebook and TikTok and all this sort of stuff. But that's not really your professional brand. Your professional brand is tied to that of LinkedIn. And we're getting asked a lot of questions around how can I really utilize this platform to generate that network and to reach out to people. So one of the things we do is we will walk you down a path in how to fully optimize your LinkedIn. So we help you create a narrative and share your story. And this ties nicely back into the networking point that we made earlier. So more often than not, what you're going to be trying to do with LinkedIn is, yes, tell the world what it is you're doing to be ready for life after the game and the industry that you're interested in. But to accelerate that readiness, to really grow your knowledge and prepare yourself properly, you want to identify people that are doing the role that you want to do now. And LinkedIn is an amazing place to find these people, to connect with them, reach out to them. And like we said earlier about just dropping people a message, drop these individuals a message, have a conversation with them. How have you gotten to this point? Because you're currently doing what my ambitions are in life after this. I want to get to your point when I leave my sport. So we will help you fully optimize your LinkedIn. We'll help you create your narrative, and we'll really start to share what it is you're doing to make sure you develop the right network and connect with the correct people.
I think what's nice about it, Karl, is we talked earlier in the piece about developing your network locally, looking within your existing sporting discipline, club, organisation for who are the people that are already invested in what you do. And that's a very much personal priority, that you reach out and you make those contacts. The beauty of networking through something like LinkedIn is you expand that globally. So it's not something to be fearful of, it's something to embrace. And like everything, there's no commitment that you have to spend hours a day on it. Far from it. You can do as little or as much as you want, but you are creating a shop window to make people aware of who you are, what's important to you, and to start attracting opportunities, drawing opportunities towards you, opening up conversations and dialogue. And it's not a difficult thing to do, but like everything in life, we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of athletes have come forward and there's just an ignorance, a lack of understanding. They've never needed to use it. We were no different until somebody then says, hang on, this is the best way to use it. You don't know. So it's very much about removing another one of those sources of fear and trepidation. I don't know how to use this platform. I don't know how to. It's not complicated. You just need a framework, and we can help you from the most basic of instruction through to actually supporting, managing, creating content with you and helping manage your account for as long as you need that to happen. So the third area to mention is our Success Beyond Sport program. Now, some people will sit down with in the coaching and mentoring, and they're very much at ground zero. They don't know what the plan is yet, and we're building that plan and we're opening their mind to different opportunities. Within the Success Beyond Sport program, we've identified 2 or 3 core areas that so many athletes are expressing interest in that we felt we needed to provide something more substantive, a deeper dive into that sector with a very, very simple objective. It will furnish you with insight, wisdom, skills, and training that if you decide to step into that sector, you will accelerate to a higher level, a more senior position, a higher level of salary, a higher level of autonomy and fulfillment. But equally, playing devil's advocate, maybe when you've done that deep dive, it actually gives you a perspective and a recognition that this is not what I thought it was. And I've actually decided this is not the sector I want to pursue. But far better to do that through a training program and course whilst you're still competing than make that step post athletic career, step into a sector that you think's right for you and think, this is not what I thought it was. So there's two or three core areas, Carl. I think the first one, I'll throw it back to you because it's an area you've got a huge amount of experience and passion for.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So the first iteration that we've gone with is medical sales, particularly sort of more focused on the orthopedic sports medicine part of medicine. And the reason for that is twofold. So it's the industry that I transitioned into. I'm closing in on 12 years now. I'm still actively involved in this world, and I love it. I think it's incredible. It's challenging, it's competitive, but you're immersed in an incredible world where you get to work with fantastic people. And the whole point of it is you're making a patient's life better. That's everything that you focus towards doing. But also, in the period I've been in this world, the amount of elite athletes I've seen transition into medical sales is frankly incredible. And I think that's because medical companies got a bit of a jump on what athletes bring. They realized that earlier than the majority of other industries. But also, in terms of what we said earlier about communication and teamwork being fundamental to the success of business, that's everything that you can bring from athletics or your sporting chapter into your next chapter to be successful. And you are essentially swapping one incredibly high-performing environment for another. Your current world, your current sporting chapter, it's all about performing on the weekend, being successful and winning your competition. In medicine, it's arguably even more high performing because of the repercussion if something goes wrong. It can be catastrophic. You're dealing with vulnerable people in a vulnerable environment, and everybody has to be efficient and working in a team, and they have to communicate insanely quickly with absolute clarity, which again is why I think athletes transition really nicely into this world of medical sales. And the whole point of success beyond sport is to give you that immersion into this world, to give you that deep dive. But just to expand on the points you made, James, and I saw this as a hiring manager, when you're looking to hire individuals and bring them into the business, you're looking for certain soft skills, but more often than not, what you're looking for is, can this individual come in and complement the existing team, but hit the ground and run and make an impact quickly? And unfortunately, with an athlete transition right now, they take all of the soft skills. Hiring managers want these people. But when it gets to the point of what's the implementation going to look like when this person comes, we're going to have to develop the hard skills. It's going to take a little bit of time to get them up and running and up to speed before they can have this impact. And the whole point about this is accelerating that readiness to hit the ground running. So I essentially open up my black book. I've got contacts all around the UK. We enable you to start developing these relationships with surgeons and clinicians and decision makers. We allow you to see access and procedures. So you're in time with theatre. You're observing these procedures. You're seeing how the clinicians work. You're understanding how you fit into that team as a rep. So when that time comes to transition, not only have you started to develop these hard skills, you've also developed a network in relationships with clinicians that you can go and talk to. When you leave your chapter and you're employed, whoever it is you're working for in this medical device space, you have an existing network of clinicians that will have a conversation with you. You already know their practice. You already know the products that they use. You already know their team. You can then go and have a conversation with these guys about, take a look at my products. Here's why I think they're better for your practice. And you can then, that's when the impact comes. That's when hiring managers start looking at a CV and thinking, so hang on, I can get an elite athlete with these insane soft skills that is going to have an impact on my existing team, but they can come in and just hit the ground running and get going. It becomes a no-brainer, and that competition in the recruitment process just completely sets you apart.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, this, and I get super excited every time you talk about it, because you're right. We've spoken to a lot of athletes that have gone from international level performance global recognition in the sport to the very, very bottom of the ladder when they start. And it doesn't seem right. The financial drop isn't a drop, it's a cliff, it's a chasm that they fall into. And then they've got to spend time just marking time to get to that level. Whereas what you've built and shaped here is something they can do alongside the training to allow them to get to a level where they've got autonomy, leadership capacity, and a much higher level of earning potential. But they've given themselves a competitive advantage. And every athlete listening recognizes that. If somebody comes to you and says, if you train and do this, you will have a competitive advantage, then they're always going to listen. And I think what's also powerful in this is there's no disrespect to anybody in education. I caveat this very carefully. Both my parents are retired teachers. Education is a huge part of my life. But I think it's always really powerful when you can learn from people, going back to our earlier point, who have walked the path. And the fact that you've built a program, you've spent, as you say, 12 years in this sector means we're not just preaching from the ivory tower. We're not just talking theoretical rhetoric. We're talking about lived life experience. And that takes us into another iteration of the Success Beyond Sport program, and that's the business of sport. Yeah. And in my world, obviously, I spent time playing professional rugby like you in the UK and over in France. I also spent a huge amount of time working in the commercial sector of sport. And then in the predominant roles I had was the chief executive roles of 2 clubs. Now that gave me wonderful experiences and insights into all the wonderful highs and the lowest of lows that can transpire when you're in that volatile, unpredictable sector that is elite sport. So we've compiled something here to give people that real insight. So many people say, I just want to work in sport. I want to work in the business of sport. So the business of sport program is designed to give you that authentic, real life experience insight into the whole raft of opportunities and the associated pros and cons so that you can really reflect on, is this right for me? Do I want this level of pressure, scrutiny, intensity, or would I be better served in this part of the business of sport? So again, that's another big part of how we help athletes really prepare and understand, where do I want to go if I want to work in the business of sport? What niche, what area is best suited to me? And I think if you think of the Success Beyond Sport program almost like a jigsaw, there's lots of component parts where we coach and support and develop your personal brand, professional brand, and your narrative. But that central piece is interchangeable. So we've got the medical sales piece. You take that out, you might put the business of sport piece in, you take that out. A third iteration of the programs around entrepreneurship, because so many athletes talk to us with ideas. They may already have the semblance of a business launched and in play, or it's very much still at the drawing board stage. But we help you understand, well, how do you bring that to life? We've both got our own businesses. In my other business, a coaching business, I spend a huge amount of my time working with entrepreneurs and business leaders. So we've got a wealth of knowledge that we can unpack to help you build a plan, which ties back into that personalized coaching we talked about earlier, to bring your business to life. And we're seeing it more and more now. Elite athletes who have a business that they are developing and investing in alongside their playing career. So what a wonderful way to reduce some of the stress and anxiety of transition if you can feel, touch, and experience something tangible that's already in place. So that's the third leg, and we will continue to develop other iterations under the Success Beyond Sport. So there's one final area, but quickly recapping what we've talked about: the coaching and the mentoring, the personal and professional brand development with a particular focus around LinkedIn, and the Success Beyond Sport program to give you a deep dive into medical sales, the business of sport, and entrepreneurship. And then our last area is just a way to try and help everybody. That's a membership site, which is going to be soon to launch, and we'll put it out across all our channels, the podcast, the website, the LinkedIn pages, etc. And it's just designed to be an archive of information, no commitment. You can pay a monthly fee, you can cancel anytime, and it allows anybody to dive into that and extract information that can help support them accelerate into a successful transition. So that's our recognition that not everybody's going to be in a position where they can invest in personalized coaching or a Success Beyond Sport program or brand development workshop. So we want to ensure that we're inclusive and we have opportunities to help everybody. Obviously, the podcast is a core element of that offering, but the membership site will be another area where we hope that, there's no barrier of entry through cost. It'll be circa probably £8 a month, and as we say, you can cancel that at any time. So they're the 4 key areas that we're hoping align with everything we've heard, allow us to tap into these themes. When you think back to the themes, how do we help you build a network? How do we help you rule in the things that you like and rule out the things that you don't like? Everything we've talked about at the back end of this episode is designed to give you the chance to do that. And we go right back to our core objective: removing fear, removing anxiety, and replacing it with a sense of excitement and confidence about how you transition into that next chapter. So we hope this episode has been helpful. DM us, reach out to us personally, emails, all the contact details are in the show notes. But we're here, we're ready, and we're waiting to help you start investing today in the successful transition as and when you need to make it into industry.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.